Hey everybody, Ben here from Cinderblock Studios, and today is an exciting day because I'm talking about 5 materials that changed the way I painted. Stick around. So there's a saying that goes something along the lines of, a certain tool does not make the artist sort of makes the tool or makes the tool usable. And while I totally agree with this, every now and then there's a certain tool or a certain material that kind of comes across and it's like, you know what, this makes so many techniques easier, and the tool transforms the way that I paint. This has happened a number of times over the past 10 years, and I want to talk about 5 tools that I've sort of added to my set and now utilize regularly in order to make better and better paintings. However, I should note that while I consider a lot of these tools to be essential to my working process, they're not essential to everybody's working process. So I'm not saying go out and buy them, but I'm definitely saying go out and try them. So I guess it was maybe about 8 or 9-ish years ago. I'm not sure. It all kind of blurs together. But I reached a point in my painting where I was like, okay, these big, wide, thick, flat brushes are nice, and I love rounds and filberts and fans, but I was still lacking some detail in my work. So I started kind of really going back, and it was actually rewatching some old Bob Ross tutorials that I rediscovered the liner brush. The liner brush is, in terms of its bristles, are about as thick, or you could say thin, as the width of whatever brush you're holding. So you guys probably can't really see the fine hairs here, but the bristles themselves come out and they'll be able to create a nice fine point. This brush is what allowed me to start really painting detail. In particular, it kind of took me out of the idea of making big, bold, broad strokes and kind of put something in my hand that felt like a pencil or a pen. I had been sketching in my sketchbook for years and years and years prior to doing this, but it was like this tool made me treat painting like drawing, which is something I technically should have been doing in the first place, because painting is really an extension of drawing. But the liner brush showed me exactly how easy that was. And in learning to use and utilize a liner brush both effectively and just incorporating it into using into each of my pieces, it actually made my use of large brushes easier, because I could then consciously make an effort to say, okay, I know what I would do with a liner brush like this, but I need to cover a bigger area. So I can use something like a larger flat or bright and use it in a very similar way to I would the liner brush, and just keep a lighter hand and just detail with a bigger brush. So I can detail with the small brush as well as the big brush. So it taught me to use my big brushes as well as it taught me to use small brushes. And in doing so, it transformed the way that I think about painting, as well as the way that I paint itself. Now, for a lot of you, when you first start acrylic painting, especially these days, there's a lot of information out there. And now I also say there's a lot of misinformation out there. There is. This is not some of it. I don't want to rant about that again for today. But one thing that people will talk about are mediums and gels, stuff in jars, stuff like this. Now, I sort of knew they existed prior to really kind of taking painting seriously, but it didn't really occur to me to use them in the way that I did. I didn't know it was out there, and I didn't really know the full extent of the range that companies like Liquitex and Golden have until I really started, 1, mostly watching their YouTube product videos, and 2, just kind of seeing what's available in the store and say, maybe when I want to try this or that, or see what other artists are doing. The one medium in particular, gel actually, is Golden's Fine Pumice Gel. Now, I've got a lot. I've got maybe half a dozen, maybe 8 or so different mediums and gels in my regular working set. But this one has been with me pretty much since the very beginning. Fine Pumice Gel creates a surface that is very similar to maybe a smooth sandpaper. And what this gel allowed me to do was to take my painting not just on canvas, but to previously unprepared wood, sort of found wood supports. It allowed me to prep things like slate and stone for painting things that in a lot of ways probably shouldn't be on those materials, but because you can prep your surface, you can sand it down, You can gesso it normally, or you can use this stuff to create a translucent sort of gray surface and really kind of build up unique textures and layers without the use of gesso. And that is a great way to kind of change the way you think about painting. In particular, I love using it on found supports, on pieces of wood, on slate, anywhere that I want to isolate where I'm painting. It also allows me to create something that's not just a painting. I can prepare, for example, a piece of stone and maybe draw something on it instead. And that is really a way that my art has kind of been taken to the next level just with a simple material. Now, back in late 2008, early 2009, I started watching videos of what they call the space painters, which are people that use just cans of like cheap spray paint on what I think is like poster board, and they create really interesting, unique space paintings with it. And there's a guy by the name of Brandon McConnell who was sort of more or less the original guy that was doing it, and then it branched out, and freaking everybody does it now, or at least everybody has tried it. Now, I didn't try it quite to the extent that they did, and I didn't certainly get into it to the same degree, but it did get me to try to use spray paint in my work, and I did start to do it back then. Not super effectively, I didn't really know how to utilize it, but it took some time to kind of really start mapping out how I wanted to use it. Now, at this point in time, a couple years went by, and Liquitex came out with their professional spray paint line. This is an acrylic-based product versus the stuff that is more either like an alcohol base or I don't even know what commercial spray paints use as sort of like their propellant, but what's different about this stuff is you can use it inside, and that's something that changed the way I use spray paint. Now you can get like a can of Krylon, which is nice, but if you spray it inside, that's all you're going to do for the day because it's going to just fumigate your entire house. This stuff I can use in the studio, and you've seen it if you've watched painting process videos. You've seen me use this stuff pretty much all the time. Actually, I'm not sure if there's a painting I've done since adding this stuff to my palette that I haven't used it at least a little bit. Just a couple smaller scale pieces I don't really need to. I'll use zinc white for some mist or something like that. But if I'm doing a mist, if I'm doing waterfall mist, if I'm doing haze in the background, I'm using this white spray paint. And it's one of those things, like, again, once I added it, it transformed the way I thought about painting. Actually, I've got a painting in front of me here. Used white spray paint on that. I think my last three, I at least used some white spray paint on that. And it's not just white, I have other colors, but the white is by far the most versatile, at least in my own work, because I'm using it in tons of atmospheric perspective stuff. Is it required? No, I can do it without the spray paint, but dang, it's really easy to do it with the spray paint. So I kind of adopted it in, and it's really awesome. Plus, when people are like, "Wow, how did you get that like nice soft gradient?" and I tell them with spray paint, they go, "Oh yeah, okay." And it doesn't take away the mystery of the piece, but it's like one of those things where it's like when you realize that you're using material that maybe isn't designed for canvas on canvas, then that's really fun. Next up, we've got actually the most recent addition to my palette, and that's paint markers. Now, like the spray paint, I'm using the Liquitex Professional ones here. There are other types. There's the Montana ones, which I think have a better marker and nib mechanism, but these are a little bit cheaper and make things a little bit easier. Plus, you can refill them, which you can do with the Montana ones too. But you know, as they're all semantics at this point. I saw these. They were. This is kind of what introduced me to them, is the Liquitex ones. So that's what I ended up picking up. I didn't think I would like paint markers. I'd seen them in use for a very long time. Other artists using them on things, particularly those who do really sort of urban style stuff, graffiti letters, whatever. And it was like, I don't know how I would use one of these, but at a certain point I was like, you know what, I just want to try it to see what I could do with them. And within, I would say, about a month, I was like, holy crap, these are changing the way I think about painting. There's a lot of techniques, a lot of things that I wanted to pull from my sketchbook that I've really never been able to do properly with a brush. The problem with painting with a brush is that you have to keep going back for paint. So you take it, you paint part of a line, and you go back and you paint part of a line. which is nice for blocking out shapes, but what happens is you run out of paint and you lose the momentum. And momentum is a powerful thing, especially with creating loose, intricate work, which is what I've kind of been doing with the paint markers myself. It's allowing me to do what I do in my sketchbook with a pen. Now, a pen's not going to run out of ink after one little line. You're going to keep being able to get all these crazy lines with it. And the paint marker does the exact same thing with paint on canvas. So I'm adopting the same techniques I'm used to with ink and putting them with acrylic on canvas, and that is a powerful thing. And it's been maybe about a year since I added these into my set, and you know what? I'm still excited about them. Like, there's a lot of things that like the gels, for example. The allure has worn off for this, and I just use it regularly. But every time I pick up a paint marker, it's exciting, and that's cool. So the final thing that transformed my painting experience is a little older than the paint markers, and actually is not a traditional supply. It's Photoshop. I've been running Photoshop for probably longer than I've had actually like a digital tablet. So if you actually want a tool, maybe it would be like a digital Wacom tablet. But the program of Photoshop in particular is something that allowed me to take the ideas of my sketchbook and not waste materials along the way. I've got a relatively old video on this channel about creating a pre-painting sketch, and I think even in that video I've moved into doing Photoshop at that point. But what I would do prior to that would be to take chalk pastels and maybe lay out the colors of a sky and sort of map things out. What Photoshop allows me to do is if I'm not really sure what I want to do in terms of color for a painting, I can take it in and I can make all of those mistakes and revisions and color on top of color and completely delete layers and bring other things back. I'm allowed to make those mistakes early, so when I take it to canvas, I'm actually saving money. Because at that point, I know exactly what colors I want, I know exactly where I want those colors, and I know exactly what the kind of values I'm looking at. So all of the guesswork is taken out of that, so when I get to the canvas, it's just fun at that point. All of the hard work is done, and it's just really about, well, not all of the hard work, but a lot of the hard work is done, and I can just kind of focus on enjoying the painting process itself. So that's a look at some of my materials and some of my process that has evolved over the past 10 years. These were 5 tools, 5 things that aren't required for me to use. Well, except maybe the liner brushes, those are probably more required than not. But the other 4 in particular, I don't need them to paint the way that I do, but they're nice shortcuts. They're things along the way that just make everything easier. So what about you guys? Do you have any particular tools that maybe make your painting experience a little bit easier? Or do you have things on your wish list that are like, I really want to try one of those things, but I don't have the money yet? Regardless of what your experience though, let me know what's going on with you in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this. Get subscribed if not already. Consider supporting on Patreon. And this has been from Cinderblock Studios. See you guys next time. Oh, God. Oh, it's not bad. I pulled a muscle in my neck or something earlier this week. Doing okay now though, but man, that's just that really hurt the other day. That's ridiculous. I got a painting I really want to finish too. Like, so excited to finish it. And it's just I got a cabin fever, you know. It's just I gotta work on this. I just haven't had time. But hey, it's the weekend now. I got time. I'll see you guys later. This is getting weird.